So at this point, I'll ask Harvey to come up. Buxton has been a tremendous partner for us, and this is not their core business, so he's not looking for a lot of sales calls on doing this part, but he also does retail, which he can explain to you about. And Harvey, thank you so much for coming and being here from Fort Worth, Texas. Thank you.
Looked to me like Jeff could have actually used another piece of help recently when you had all those Japanese people come by. Because although I've been in this country for a long time, I actually spent quite a bit of my time overseas, some of it in Japan, because at college in the U.S. I studied Japanese. So we had about 150 people from Japan come to recently, and where did it dropped altogether? There it is. Even down. Oh, I see. The spring came on. You know, whenever I hear people talk about other communities, I've been living in Fort Worth, Texas for about 40 years now, and I love it, but there's one thing that we can always say that most other cities can't claim. There's only one place outside of D.C. that prints money. In Fort Worth, we have the only government printing plant outside of D.C., so most of the paper money you have in your pockets, we make them at our home. Listening to what Kingsport has done, and we've actually been working with Jeff for, I'm not sure, 6 or 7 years now, and our core business, of course, not necessarily of course, is to help communities, bring retail economic development, and we work with a lot of retailers. In fact, we work with about 2,000 retailers to help them find locations for their concepts. So when Jeff asked us to help them out to try to understand their in-migrants, it's not normally what we do, but because we've been working so much together, and he knows we have all this data. So he asked us to, he's able to understand the quantitative information with the water taps, but he needed to know a little bit more about who these people are. And until most recently, I didn't, in fact, sitting here, I learned a lot more about what was in your plan, because other people in our company have been working with Jeff, and he's extremely aggressive in moving this city forward. And I know that a lot of communities are struggling to try to increase their population. So in addition to knowing that he's growing, he wanted to know more about what these people are all about. How many of you in this room know what psychographics is? Well, it's a way that people use today to try to understand people better, because there's just so much data available. In fact, most recently, we've been in the paper because we were hired by one of the political parties to help them identify people who would be very large donors. And we claim no political affiliation as long as somebody is willing to pay for the project. And in fact, both parties use this kind of technology, but we just happen to be fortunate enough to be in the news for it. In any case, what it is when we want to understand more about what these people are, first, of course, you identify your in-migrants, just as Jeff explained by seeing the water taps. And then you start to profile your in-migrants, and then determine the lifestyles and purchasing habits. And once you start to do that, you start to get a much better picture of what you have. We're all familiar with demographics: age, sex, race, income, and education. But there's a certain limit to what you can do with that. For example, my brother and I, we're only 2 years apart, and If I were a golfing retailer or a magazine, I'd love my brother because he plays golf whenever there's free time. In my case, I haven't been on a golf course in about 10 years. But, and I don't think my wife would let me leave for 4 hours to just be on my own. But the thing is, demographically, my brother and I, very similar age, similar education, similar income, and in fact, he only lives about 8 minutes away from me. But the thing is, psychographically, we're very different. And so what we want to do is find out what these immigrants look like in Kingsport. And although this is the project that we did for them, you can easily see how this translates to retirees, to understand a little bit more about what type of retirees you have or what type of retirees you want to attract. So for example, instead of just the demographics, this person, Tom King, 37, moved into the area in the last 6 months. His wife, Nora, has 2 children, and we have all this other information about this particular person, Tom King. And then similarly for Angela Hernandez, we have this type of information as well. And I know someone always starts thinking about Big Brother and all of that, but the fact is all of this data is out there and available, and we just amassed a lot of that. As I mentioned, our core competency is to work with retailers, and we analyze exactly who their customers are, and we can find them anywhere in the country. And there's a lot of other things involved in terms of density to determine if it's a good location. So we actually reverse the process for communities. We analyze all the households and say what retailers could succeed there. So in order to do this, you have to know things about life stages, finance, attitude, behavior. Basically, you want to know what their purchase habits are, what their media habits are, and all of that data goes into what we do. But as I mentioned, we also work in the political field. Jeff mentioned that we have a very growing segment in the healthcare industry as well. Healthcare is becoming more consumer, or their term, patient-oriented, and in order to be able to do that, they want to understand more about their patients. We do this because we have about 250 databases, data on virtually every household in the United States, up to 7 individuals in that household. And we update that every 8 weeks. In some instances, we may update that even more frequently because we have a data group that's always updating because you can't possibly update all of the new data all in 1 month, so we just continuously renew certain aspects of it. The other thing is if you put all the data together, you could actually end up with 120 million unique households and you really can't put it to use. So we segment them. And Jeff referred to Mosaic. That's a segmentation system that we use. So if we have a lot of families that look very similar to each other, we put them into a segment. So once we have, for example, in this case, 70 segments, it's something you can work with. So for this segment, FO1, steadfast conservatives, when you look at this chart, what this means is that they are 56% more likely to watch daytime game shows and contest TV. See, I'm at the age where I can't see anything, even with my glasses, it doesn't even focus in. So 35% more likely to be high school educated. Aura and I figured out yesterday that so she asked me a very confidential question. She said, "How old are you?" Well, I'm at the leading edge of the baby boomers, so, you know, I'd like to be a retiree, but my 2 kids in college won't let me. The thing is that the steadfast conservative, we have, it says here, 75,000 individual characteristics. Now, we have that many categories, but not every household is going to have be able to populate all 75,000 categories. We use what we can. The other thing is that all of our segmentation system actually starts at the household level. And so I'm going to try to rush through this one. because a lot of segmentation systems only look at a zip plus 4 level, and there are just too many households and it becomes too average. So we actually start at the individual household and then build it back up. If you put all of those segments together, this is what the U.S. household profile would look like. So in this particular segment, B03, about 7.8% of the American households fall into that segment. Now, if I put all of Kingsport immigrants households, overlay this over the line graph, this is what we find. And you could see that there are certain segments that are much higher than the typical U.S. community. So those are the ones we start to focus on. But when you look at the entire U.S. Community, you're really not accurate enough. So what we did was we tried to find a geography that's just the Kingsport area where most of the immigrants were coming from, and that's what we profiled. And we profiled that, and the next slide actually shows it a little bit better. What we find, for example, is that in H03, most of the households fall into to this level, whereas the immigrants are about nearly 5%. So we have a bunch of analysts working in our office in Fort Worth. We have probably about 50 analysts, and then we have a lot of data people. And this kind of thing actually excites them very much because, see, when they see a segment like H03 stick out so much, so differently, that they can be 100% accurate in determining what these type of people are like. So they like that. So what we do is we measure the difference between the immigrants and then the other households in that same geography, and we can see what the differences are. And we use the Mosaic Guide to tell us more. And again, in this, the one that's most readily available will give you perhaps 2,000 points of information, but the one our analysts use all 75,000. So this is the end result of this. Actually, Jeff had shown in his slide, but what it is we want to find out what these households that are immigrants are alike with each other, and then we also want to see how they're different from the other households. And from that, you start to get a better picture of what these households are like, and then you can actually create programs to be sure that you have the proper services, amenities, or you want to promote your community to these groups, and then you know what areas you need to be promoting. And these are, again, some of the things that Jeff had already gone through. The thing that wasn't mentioned in Jeff that seemed interesting to me is that a lot of them are likely to be Asian and Hispanic. And although there's a wide variety of people, these two groups seem to stand out quite a bit. Anecdotally, one of the things I know about Asians is that a lot of them start their own businesses. Having been in this country and worked for Tandy Corporation and large organizations, there's a need to be able to communicate with each other when you work. And one of the difficulties that a lot of new Asians have is to assimilate. And so a lot of them like to start their own businesses because there's not the same need to communicate in order to advance in that organization. So I see that even in Fort Worth, we have so many new Asians that are starting their own businesses. Again, these are some of the things that Jeff had gone over. So I'm not, and then this is the part that he hadn't covered. But again, we provided Jeff a lot of information about the behavior of all of these people, but this is just some of it. There are the index 100 is the norm. So if it's 184, 84% more likely to travel within the USA, 37% more likely to be online buyers, etc. And they've shown that, well, clothing, known interest, it's about the average for the United States, and there are all these other categories. So now that I sat through Jeff's presentation and understand what we do, I see, like so much of the other things he does, he's planning a program to encourage more in-migration. And I happened to be in Oak Ridge yesterday talking to the president of the chamber, and other than knowing that that's where the Manhattan Project was, I didn't know much else. But he has a problem, like a lot of other communities, where a lot of the younger people are moving out, so he wants to figure out how to bring young people back in. So that's, I think, a challenge that a lot of communities have in the United States today. So again, we've gone through this already. So when I was asked to put this together, I was trying to figure out, I know our core business is working with retailers, so how does that fit in? So I was starting to do some research on retirees. And there are a number of things. For example, a lot of retirees would like to continue their education. They want to be sure that health services are readily available. But one of the interesting things is that they want more convenient shopping and dining, and in many cases more choices. And now that I've admitted I'm in the leading edge of the baby boomers, I can say that, yeah, my wife and I do like dining choices. There are a lot of times when we just, or she doesn't feel like cooking, and we just want to go and dine out. We have so many choices today. When I was in Fort Worth about 35 years ago, you couldn't get sushi. And today there are like 25, 30 sushi restaurants just in little old Fort Worth. So I don't know if that's her favorite, but gives me a lot of choices. But the other thing that I heard is that bringing retirees into your community is a long-range project, and that's really true with so many other things. Any of the people who are in city staff or city organizations know that the politicians always want everything done right away because they can say, this is what I did. But the people, like the person I met yesterday who's been in economic development for many years, knows that it's a long process. And so one of the things that I can see is that the people who are going to be retiring, a number of them I'm sure are from urban or suburban areas accustomed to dining and shopping choices. So I think that part of the program is to be sure that you are attracting new retailers and new restaurants. The other aspect of this actually is that you get immediate benefit from it because we all want that. If any of you are older economic development folks, you'd know that people used to say that retailers and restaurants build the rooftops and they will come. Well, it doesn't work that way anymore, and because people don't like to move into areas where they have fewer dining and shopping choices. We're totally different. When again, in Fort Worth 35 years ago, there were 2 restaurants, the Swiss House and the Carriage House, and people didn't dine out as much. But today, name them, they're there. Applebee's, Olive Garden, Red Lobster, they're all there because we've actually changed the way we live. We're most often families with both spouses working. We are a little bit spoiled, maybe a lot spoiled, and we like to be able to dine out and enjoy ourselves. And so when we make a decision to move somewhere, whether we're relatively young or whether we're retirees, we're really looking for more shopping and dining choices. And so that's how I've sort of wrapped back into what Buxton generally does. But I find that the retiring community is very interesting. And again, I did this all because I was going to come here, Jeff. But there are something like, I'm sure you've heard the number, is it 4 million baby boomers that are retiring every year? I'm not one of them because, as I said, I got 2 kids in college. But so that's quite a large market to look at when you consider that they have higher disposable income than any other retiring group previous to them, and the other thing is, although some of them are continuing to work, what they do is they really revitalize or invigorate the economy, because they're not looking for jobs, but they're putting money back into it, so they're buying services and buying goods. So it adds a dynamic where it doesn't have the need for jobs, but actually creates jobs. So I see that in a balanced community, you have to have a very active retiree program as well as all the other programs, because you just have so many retirees coming into the marketplace. And that's my wrap-up. Thank you. Did you want to see if there are any questions? Or?
Sure. I think we just about come back up on time, but if there are any quick questions, we can be happy to take those, or be happy to talk to you individually. Any questions? All right. Yes, sir.
Well, there are certain concepts that are natural for older people. In Fort Worth, we have a cafeteria chain called Luby's that a lot of older people like. Whenever I travel around the country, I try to stop at, I know it's Tennessee-based. What? Cracker Barrel, thank you. I drive my daughter to college the spring and fall every year from Fort Worth to Virginia, and we try to stop at Cracker Barrels because I read somewhere that they clean their toilets every 1 hour or something like that. But the one thing I noticed is that there are a lot of elderly people there. So there are certain concepts that serve them. When we're doing our work, we don't. If we're specifically asked to anticipate what the population is going to look like from 5 to 10 years from now, we can do that for the retailer. But they usually don't ask us that. They want to know whether the people who patronize them today are there where there's a large enough density so they can put a $1 million restaurant there or $1.5 million restaurant. Very infrequently do they ask me, what's it going to be 5 or 10 years from now? The retail concepts, you may have noticed, change. Sometimes it takes a long time, but they have to continuously remake themselves, otherwise the people tire of them. So they try to have a shorter range in terms of where they want to place their stores and worry about where they need to be 10 years from now. So I guess I'm not sure if I answered it in the way you'd like, but we don't usually anticipate what the demographics will look like. It's all there in the report, but what they're looking for is, if I break ground now, when I put that store or restaurant up, will I start making money? And we usually tend to service that requirement.
Are there any other questions?